In this video, we'll be creating a user session. This session is necessary to be able to identify our signed in users. Okay, so whenever our users need to access some pages or resources that should only be accessible to signed in users. Okay, so it is this session will be able to identify which of our users are signed in and which of them are not. Okay, and this session is also necessary so that our users don't need to keep signing in and resigning in over and over again. They just need to sign in once, okay, and they will be signed. They will remain signed in until they either log out or their session expired. Okay, so the first thing we'll be doing now is to call our create user session. We are going to be creating this function in a moment. Okay, so we're going to call the function create user session. All right, and to this function we're going to be passing an object that is going to contain a user ID, okay, and the user role. All right, so I'm going to have user dot role. Okay, and just before we go ahead to create this function, let me save this. We need to make a little modification to our query here. Okay, this query that we used to get a user from the database. All right, so we need to add to this where clause. Okay, so if the email is correct, and we need to add a little statement here, and the local authentication method is part of any of the values in our auth providers. Okay, so we're going to have auth providers. Okay, so we only need users that has a local authentication method in their auth providers. Okay, you know, we are going to have some users that they only registered with either GitHub or Google, so we don't need such users in our local sign-in function. All right, so I'm going to save that. We can break this query into 2 lines. Okay, so this also works. Okay, now we are going to go ahead and create this function. Okay, so we are going to create the function in a session files. Okay, so we go to this lib directory, and then we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it session.ts. Okay, and as a requirement to this video, you'll be needing a Redis database instance. Okay, so it is the Redis database instance that we'll be using to save our user sessions. We will not be using a JSON web token for this project, because stored sessions, they offer better advantages over JSON web token. With JSON web token, if there is an errant user, there is no way you can log out that user unless you are going to be logging out all of your application users, and that is not very convenient for other users. Let's say you want to only log out a single user and you have like 1,000 users using your application. With JSON web token, you have to log out every other persons, every other users you have. But with stored sessions, you can easily delete their session from your database and they will not be able to access your application again. Okay, so we'll be using Redis instance, Redis database to store our users sessions. Okay, so if you don't have a Redis database setup, I have a video on that. Now you can set up an Upstash Redis instance. Okay, so the video is going to be in the description, and it's possible you are seeing a link at the top right of your video right now. So that link is going to show you how to set up an Upstash Redis instance. Okay, so that's that for that. And here we are going to be creating a function. It's going to be an asynchronous function, so we're going to call it create user session. All right, it's going to be accepting a user object, and the type, or we are going to be creating a user schema, a user session schema. So we're going to go to Zod schema. Okay, so here we're going to have a user session schema. Okay, so let's call it user session, and we're going to have schema. Okay, so it's going to be z.object, and as you can see from what we passed to our create session function, we're going to be having an ID which is going to be a number. So we're going to have z.number. All right, and we also need role. Role is going to be one of 2 possible values. Okay, so we're going to have an enum here. Okay, so it's either the role is admin, okay, or I'm going to or the role is user. Okay, so that's going to be a user session schema. Okay, so we can just add a comment here so that that's going to be descriptive. We can say schema for user session. Okay, schema for user session. All right, so we need to import that. So this is going to be of data type user session schema. We can just come to the top here and create a type for that. All right, so I'm going to have type, then you are going to have a user session. Let's call it user session. Okay, so it's going to be equal to zid. All right, let me import zid from zod dot infer. Okay, so we're going to be passing our user session schema. We're going to have type of user session schema. Okay, so now we need to pass this user session as the data type of our user. All right, now the first thing we're going to do is to generate a session ID. Okay, so we need this session ID to be able to identify our user session in our Redis database, and we also be passing this ID down to the user browser. So anytime the user needs to interact with our app and the user needs to access some pages that should only be accessible to signed in users, so we're going to use the session ID that we're going to store in the user browser. We're going to use that ID to check our Redis database if we have that session ID stored also in the database. Okay, so we are going to be having a longer random byte. So we're going to be having 512 random bytes so that any user cannot just guess what ID we are using in our database. Okay, so we're going to convert that to string. Now we need to store this session ID alongside the user data in our database, in our Redis instance database. Okay, and in that case we need to create a Redis client. Okay, so we're going to go to this directory. We're going to create a Redis file, right? So we're going to say redis.ts. Okay, the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be importing the server only package to ensure that this only executes on the server. All right, so now we are going to be creating a Redis client. So we're going to have const. Okay, we're going to call this Redis client. Okay, so we are going to create a new instance of Redis. Okay, we already installed this package when we are setting up our application afresh. If you go to package.json, you're going to see a package with the name Redis. So we already have the package installed. So we're going to be importing this from Redis. So we're going to have imports, and then we're going to have a Redis, okay, from at Redis. Okay, so we're going to be creating a new instance of that. Invoke that. Then this is looking for URL, which is going to be your Redis URL, and it's also looking for token. Okay, that's going to be your Redis token. So you need to provide these two values. They will be available if you already have a Redis instance. I already have one. Okay, so I'm going to be setting that up in my env file. Okay, but I will not be opening my env file. Let's go to .env.example. Okay, I already have those env set up there. So you just copy this value, this Redis URL and this Redis token. Okay, so you copy these two and then you provide your own Redis instance URL and you provide your own Redis token. So copy these two now and paste them in your .env file. I already have mine there, so I'm not going to open that for you to see. Okay, so after those two, we also need one more env, and that is this session expiration seconds. So just copy this also and paste it in your .env file. You don't need to provide any different value. We already have the value here, 604,800 seconds, which is 7 days in seconds. Okay, so you know, we have 7 days. Okay, and in a single day we have 24 hours. In an hour we have 60 minutes, and a minute we have 60 seconds. So if you evaluate this value, you're going to arrive at that value. Okay, so you have 604,800 seconds. So these are the 3 environment variables that you need now. we need the Redis token, the Redis URL, and these are session expiration seconds. Okay, so copy all those into your .env file. All right, now we can go back to okay, so after you paste that in your env file and you provided your Redis credential, so we are going to go to our env validator. Okay, so we need to provide those also in our env schema. Okay, so we can come here. Okay, so let's add the comment. We can say this is Redis, and we need the Redis URL. Okay, so this is going to be a string. We have z.string. Okay, and this is supposed to be a valid URL. Okay, and we also have the Redis token. We can go to our .env.example and copy this env value, env property. Okay, so we're going to go here, going to paste that so that we don't make any mistake. Okay, so here we are going to say this is also supposed to be the string data type. All right, and at least a minimum of one character. All right, so that's that for that. We also need to create another property for this session expiration seconds. Okay, so it's going to be, we are going to coerce this to a number. Okay, so we can come after here. So let's call this session. Okay, session with double S. I'm going to coerce this into a number. Okay, so we have z.coerce. Okay, so we are coercing it to data type of number. All right, why are we not having suggestion there? And this should be a positive number. Okay, so that's that for that. We are going to save our schema, then we go back to our Redis file. So now we are going to say env. We need to import that from env server. Okay, env Redis URL. Okay, and then we need to provide the Redis token, env.redis token. Okay, so we're going to save that. Now we're going to be importing our Redis client in our session.ts file. Okay, so we're going to be storing our user object, which is containing the user ID and the user role. So we're going to be storing it in our Redis instance. Okay, and we are going to be using this session ID as our key to that value in our Redis instance. Okay, so we're going to await this asynchronous operation. We're going to have Redis client, which will be importing from Redis. Then we are going to have .set Redis client .set. So we need to provide our key. So our key is going to go like this. We have base auth, which is the name of our app. You can call it anything. Okay, then we have a colon, we have session. Okay, and then we are going to be having a session ID. Okay, so all of this is going to be the key, and then the value is going to be our user value. Okay, so we are going to be setting an expiration time for this value in our Redis database. The expiration time is going to be 7 days, and after that 7 days, this will be automatically deleted from our Redis database. We are going to get this expiration time from our env. Okay, so I need to import this dot. That is the session expiration seconds that we set up the other time. So with this now, we are creating this value in our Redis database with this as the key. Okay, so after storing this in our Redis database, we need to set this session ID as a cookie on our user browser, so that we can be using that to identify our user anytime they want to interact with our app. Okay, so we're going to have an await keyword, then we're going to call it set cookie. We are going to be creating this function. Okay, cookie. Okay, set cookie. Okay, so to this function, we're going to be providing what is going to be our cookie session key. All right, so we are going to call this cookie session, okay, key. Okay, and then we need to provide the session ID. All right, session ID. So let's create this constant. Okay, I'm going to copy that. Let's come here and then I'm going to say const cookie session key is equal to session hyphen ID. All right, now let's create this set cookie function down there. Okay, so this is going to be an asynchronous function. Also, we have function. All right, and I'm going to call this set cookie. Okay, so it's first accepting the cookie session key. Okay, so we're just going to call this key, and the data type is going to be of a data type string. Okay, we're also accepting the session ID, so we're going to have a session ID which is also string. Okay, and the last thing we'll be accepting is the expiration. Okay, it's going to be an optional parameter. Okay, we're going to provide a default parameter which is going to be session expiration seconds. Okay, now let's go inside of our function. All right, so we're going to get our cookie store. All right, Next.js provide a function to interact with our cookies. So we're going to be importing it from next headers. That's cookies from next headers. Okay, that is going to give us our cookie store. All right, and now we need to set our cookies. Okay, so we're going to have cookie store dot set. Okay, this is going to be accepting the key which we've provided as an argument here. All right, and then the value which is going to be our session ID. What did we call it here? We called it session ID. Okay, so we're going to pass session ID. Now we need to pass some options. Okay, the first option is going to be the secure option, and that is going to be true. Okay, so that is going to allow our cookie to only be sent over HTTPS connection. All right, then we're going to have the HTTP only. We're going to make that to be true. That is not going to make our cookie to be accessible with JavaScript and the user browser. So same site is going to be lax. All right, to protect against CSRF attacks. And then the expiration time of our token is going to be 7 days. So we're going to have date. Okay, dot now. It's dot now our current date, our current time plus 7 days, which is going to be the expiration time that we provided as the argument. By default, it's the 7 days in seconds. But this set function, this cookie function, is expecting the expires property to accept milliseconds. So we are going to convert this to milliseconds, and to convert that, we're going to multiply it with 1000. Okay, we are done with this now. So we need to export our create user session. We're going to export that. All right, and we need to import this in our server action. So we are going to import this. Okay, so this is now going to create a cookie on our user's browser, and it's also going to create an entry in a Redis database. Okay, and as you can see, this is an asynchronous function. There is the possibility that an error can occur when setting this in a Redis database. So we are going to be handling the error. Okay, and as I hope you can still remember our custom try catch wrapper. All right, the function is not returning anything, but we need to check if there is an error. Okay, so I'm going to have create session error. All right, now we're going to check if the error is true. We're going to say if create session error is true. That means if an error occurred when we are creating the user session, then we are first going to log the error here. Okay, just for development purpose, I'm going to say error creating user session. Okay, so let's also log the error. All right, and now we'll be returning an error response to the caller of our server action. So we are just going to copy this. Okay, I'm just going to copy this. No need to retype all of that. So I'm going to have an object and paste that. Okay, so what is happening there? Yes, we need this. Okay, that can't be, it shouldn't be outside. We need something here. Okay, is there any part of all of this we are not closing? Okay, sorry, we need to wrap this in a try catch custom wrapper. Okay, sorry, omitted that. So I'm going to have this, and we need to close this. Okay, that should solve our problem. Why is this? Okay, let me get rid of this. Okay, so now we are good to go. This is going to create our user sessions. Now let's test this out. Okay, so we've not created the dashboard page. Let's go back to sign in. Okay, so I'm going to open my dev tools now so that you can see if we actually have token set on our browser. Okay, so I'm going to go to applications, application, and then cookie. Okay, so do we have, okay, so this is going to show our cookie. Is there any way to zoom this in? I'm not sure. Okay, I can actually zoom that in. All right, let me see if I can put this at the base. Okay, so that you can see this much more. Okay, so I'm going to sign in now. This, all right, you should be looking at this. We should have a session ID cookie set here, all right, and a successful sign in. All right. Okay, so you see we have a cookie. Okay, and this is our session ID. Okay, we made it intentionally long so that it will be harder for anyone to guess. Okay, so this is our session ID. This session ID is also stored in our Redis database alongside our user ID and the user role. Okay, so anytime I want to validate our user, if the user is already signed in, we just grab this cookie, then we check if it exists in our Redis database. Okay, if it exists, that means the user is already signed in. If it does not exist, then that means the user is not signed in. A not signed in user is not even supposed to have this in the first instance. So if this does not exist, that means that user is malicious, and then we're just going to delete this cookie right from the server. Okay, and that will be all for this video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so that we'll be seeing more of these videos when I'm dropping them. All right, so thanks for subscribing, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.